Morning, everyone. Um, Morning, everyone. Um, Moment, please. Okay, hopefully this will mean that I am not feeding back from uh, YouTube. But good morning. Jordan will be joining us in about 5 minutes, and I look forward to that. But good morning, Kathy. Nice to see you. Um, Let me take a short swing. The logo of my school, Phoenix Academy Firebirds. So they are all reemerging from the ashes, up from the ashes, as the Firebird did. Um, let's see. So we're going to go on with the engagement of the feminine. I just want to, I'll go, let me see. I'm going to go back 2 paragraphs so that we set context here. And Jordan will join us shortly, but I will begin this reading. The global feminist movement is in the process of its initiation into her own authority. The myth that best embodies this process is masterfully rendered by Sylvia Pereira in her work on the descent to the goddess. She formulates that Inanna, the innocent goddess of the upper world, must descend into the realm of her dark sister, Erizkagal. This entails surrender to her suffering and sacrifice, but return to the upper world tempered by the experience of the dark side and empowered to claim her wholeness and equality with men. Thus, Erizkakal and her Hindu analogs, Kali and Durga, are the guiding myths for our collective currently. This is uh, this is the crossroad Jung reached in his Red Book in his dealing with Salome versus Philemon, his competing emerging myths, but it is left for us to make our own choice at this point in the history of our civilization. It is my postulate that the Philemon is the transitional archetype that will set the stage to welcome Kali, the destroyer, and Durga, the protector warrior, at the center stage in the emerging global consciousness. The feminine authority will ride the masculine order as Kali rides Shiva, who surrenders to her authority in this image. Quote, Jung further amplifies this emergence of the wise woman. We are dealing with the heterosexual eros or anima figure in 4 stages, and consequently with 4 stages of the eros cult. The first stage, Hawa, Eve, Earth, is purely biological. Woman is equaled with the mother and only represents something to be fertilized. The second stage, Helen of Troy, is still dominated by the sexual eros, but on an aesthetic and romantic level, where woman has already acquired some value as an individual. The third stage raises Eros to the heights of religious devotion and thus spiritualizes him. Hawa has been replaced by spiritual motherhood. Finally, the fourth stage illustrates something which unexpectedly goes beyond the almost unsurpassable third stage, sapientia. How can wisdom transcend the most holy and the most pure? Presumably only by the virtue of the truth that the less sometimes means the more. This stage represents a spiritualization of Helen and consequently of the Eros as such. Now, I will just point you to Proverbs 8, 11 through 32, where the early biblical writers already identified Eros as wisdom. And in the Bible, in Greek, it was originally called Sophia. And the cult of Sophia survived up through the Russian diaspora and Russian Orthodox diaspora, but it was forced back by the papacy and Western Catholicism, Holy or Roman Catholic Catholicism. And but if you read those passages, you'll understand that these ideas are not new. They go back thousands of years, and so they made it into the Bible in Proverbs chapter 8 and verses 11 through 32. I hope you'll take a look at that. I don't happen to have my Bible handy, I don't think, so otherwise I would read it to you. So now I'll begin the section that we're reading today, and we're reading from Jung's Red Book for Our Time, Searching for Soul Under Postmodern Conditions, edited by Murray Stein and Thomas Arst. And this is an essay by Ashok Bedi, who is a friend of this channel and whose interview you can find online on this channel. I'll just put his name on here so that you can search for it later. It's a very interesting interview that we did with him some years ago now. Okay, so that's Ashok's name. And Ashok is a Jungian analyst in Wisconsin. So anyway, that's the pedigree of this article. And he calls this essay Jung's Red Book, a compensatory image for our contemporary culture from a Hindu perspective. So let me read the first paragraph. This formulation of the engagement with the feminine is a derivative of Jung's amplification of Goethe's Faust. However, there is a different trajectory of engagement with the feminine in the Eastern Hindu framework. This is amplified in the Kundalini Yoga system, which is a paradigm for the mysterious union, the hieros gamos, between the masculine and the feminine. Stop for a moment as Jordan has arrived and bring him up to date. So Jordan, we are on page 347. We're talking about engagement with the feminine. Okay, and so I was reading the first paragraph that we're addressing this week, and So I'll just start at the beginning of the paragraph again and read that. As you see, I have it heavily annotated in my book. So, the formulation of the engagement with the feminine is a derivative of Jung's amplification of Goethe's Faust. However, there is a different trajectory of engagement with the feminine in the Eastern Hindu framework. This is amplified in the Kundalini Yoga system, which is a paradigm for the mysterious union, the Hieros Gamos, between the masculine and the feminine, the Shiva and the Shakti energies of the psyche. In Kundalini Yoga, there are 7 stages of engagement with the feminine, starting from the first, or the root chakra, and going up to the 7th, the highest chakra. These include engagement with the feminine as mother embodied in the images of Durga. This is followed by mother as a place of respite from the father's world as Parvati. In the 3rd chakra, she is represented as a muse inspiring the warrior who is manifest in the archetype of Radha, who inspired Krishna. This process culminates with the feminine as a lover, Uma, the consort of Shiva, in the 4th, the heart chakra. Beyond this is the stage of spiritualization of the anima as she becomes an inspiration to Brahma for his voice and his music in the 5th, or the throat chakra, as the goddess Saravasti. In the 6th, or the eye chakra, Lakshmi becomes ego guide, giving Vishnu a 3rd eye for insight. And finally, at the highest level of integration between the masculine and the feminine, in the 7th chakra, she becomes the soul guide to Shiva as Bhagwati, the universal great mother, and Aditi, a soul guide to Shiva, or Aditi, the great grandmother goddess of the void and new creation. Some of these goddess archetypes are discussed in my earlier publication. And there's a footnote. So, do you have a comment, Jordan, as we go on here?
It seems to me I hadn't thought about this before, but between the feminine and the masculine, between the generative and the formative, it's that whole arche techne, to create, formlessness, inspiration, to make, put to form. But the Kundalini coming up from the Hara, the 1 point, the sacral root chakra, is formless and just energy, except then it emanates through the pineal and the frontal lobe as the cobra and the pharaoh's mask. And that's the uraeus. So it goes from formlessness to form. And I think this is a great paragraph about the both and, whether it's anima, animus, generative, formative, masculine, feminine, but that the place of creation is always a both and. It's not, the joke I'm reminded of is, oh, God didn't need a woman to make Adam, but he needed one to make Jesus? What's up? So
yeah,
there's always a both rather than
yeah.
just either or.
Okay, that's good. Okay, I'll read the footnote. The footnote for this paragraph is Ashok Bedi, Awakening the Slumbering Goddess, the latent code of the Hindu goddess archetypes. Okay, so you can refer back to those, or to Ashok's book for more detail about this. Okay, so reading on. The role of mother as Durga and Parvati as the respite would be akin to the stage of Hawa or Eve. In the 3rd chakra, the feminine is perceived as a muse, Radha, and in the 4th chakra as a lover, Uma, a more aesthetic figure in a romantic engagement with the feminine as Helen. In the fifth and sixth chakras, she is perceived as a spiritual figure, Sarasvati and Lakshmi, an inspiration and an ego guide as the Virgin Mary. However, in the seventh chakra of the highest level of engagement, she is seen as a soul guide, the universal great mother, Bhagavati and Aditi, akin to Jung's formulation of sapientia. Do you happen to have a Bible there, Jordan?
Mm.
Readily available?
Um,
I was referring to this passage in Proverbs about wisdom and Sophia and uh,
I
Snowman. Yes, this is live at the moment. We're alive.
I don't. I guess it's how funny. I guess it got left at the cabin, which is now no longer mine. So,
Well, somebody is
oh,
uplifted by
gave them the hotel drawer book.
it. Okay. So I've already discussed how even in the Old Testament, the feminine is referred to as wisdom, as Sophia. Um, and the role of Sophia is plainly described in verse or in chapter 8 of the Proverbs paragraphs, verses 11 through 32. Okay, so going on.
Let's look
Go
it
ahead.
up.
Oh, you can look it up. That's
Yeah,
right. Why don't you do that? Get chapter
Proverbs
8 of Proverbs.
7 through 32.
Yeah. Okay, I'll go on reading it
Okay.
and then we'll come back to that in a minute. Okay, in the Red Book, Jung's engagement with the feminine starts with mother as darkness that leads to the light. This is akin to Goethe's prescription of descent into the realms of the mothers to find a way to reclaim connection with the lost Helen, Anima. Jung states, the darkness is your mother. She behooves reverence, since the mother is dangerous. She has power over you since she gave you birth to you. Honor the darkness as the light, and you will illuminate your darkness. This may correspond to the mother as a dark place of origins, the Durga Parvati of the lower chakras in the Kundalini Yoga. Then Jung goes on to relate to the mother as a place of respite, akin to the Parvati as a place of respite for the weary Ganesha in the second chakra of Kundalini Yoga. So do you have that passage? Oh, let me just finish this little
Okay.
part of this book. Okay, so quote, "O mother stone, I love you. I lie snuggled up against your warm body, your late child. Blessed be you, ancient mother. Yours is my heart and all glory and power. Amen." The unquote. The emergence of Kali and Durga, feminine archetypes, is embodied in the Fearless Girl bronze statue facing down the Wall Street Bull in Manhattan, in the New York City. Fearless Girl is a bronze sculpture by Uruguayan-born American artist Kristen Vispal, depicting a defiant girl staring down the well-known charging bull, a symbol of static negative masculine order. This statue was installed on March 7th, 2017, on the eve of International Women's Day. Okay, so before I go on to the next part, then why don't you read the biblical section, and I'll find the Fearless Girl statue to show after a bit.
Okay. Proverbs 8, verses 11. I'm going to start with 10 through 32. Choose my instruction instead of silver, knowledge, rather than choice gold. For wisdom is more precious than rubies, and nothing you desire can compare with her. I, wisdom, dwell together with prudence. I possess knowledge and discretion. To fear the Lord is to hate evil. I hate pride and arrogance, evil behavior and perverse speech. Counsel and sound judgment are mine. I have insight. I have power. By my king's reign and rulers issue decrees that are just. By my princes govern and nobles, all who rule on earth. I love those who love me, and those who seek me find me. With me are riches and honor, enduring wealth and prosperity. My fruit is better than fine gold. What I yield surpasses choice silver. I walk in the way of righteousness, along the paths of justice, bestowing a rich inheritance on those who love me, and making their treasures full. The Lord brought me forth as the first of his works, before the deeds of old. I was formed long ages ago, at the very beginning, when the world came to be. When there were no watery depths, I was given birth. When there were no springs, when there were no, this versing on this is really weird. When there were no springs overflowing with water, before the mountains were settled in place, before the hills, I was given birth. Before he made the world or its fields, or any of the dust of the earth, I was there when he set the heavens in place, when he marked out the horizon on the face of the deep, when he established the clouds above and fixed securely the fountains of the deep, when he gave the sea its boundary, so the waters would not overstep his command, and when he marked out foundations of the earth. Then I was constantly at his side. I was filled with delight day after day, rejoicing always in his presence, rejoicing in his whole world, and delighting in mankind. Now then, my children, listen to me. Blessed are those who keep my ways.
Okay. So, as we see, this has been an idea in human thinking for thousands of years. I'll now show you the Fearless Girl statue.
Actually, right before you do, it's
Okay.
funny. When I searched for that, it gave me an AI overview. And so it's like Cliff Notes. So let me read this one paragraph. Proverbs 8:11-32 describes the value of wisdom, personified as a woman, emphasizing that wisdom is more precious than rubies, and that those who seek her early will find life and favor with God. It further details how wisdom was present with God during creation and takes great delight in being close to him, urging people to listen to her instruction and be blessed by her ways. So
So AI figured it out too.
yeah, it's like it's AI overview on the top of the search, and it's like this little fully, it's just full little cliff notes,
Yeah, interesting.
and then it has
Okay.
like key points and all. So anyway, yeah, go ahead.
All right. So let me share Fearless Girl here. If I can find the share button behind my camera. Okay, there it is. All right, so this is Fearless Girl, the statue that is on Wall Street. And obviously they're selling this poster here, and you have the opportunity to purchase it. There are many people trying to sell this a poster or a picture of Fearless Girl. So anyway, you get the idea what I'm talking about. And the feminine is not afraid of the bull in the China shop, American um, political scene at the moment.
Well, you know what's interesting about that, the pairing, it's like the Merrill Lynch bull, and then the little girl put there. It's 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 almost the same story as Tinkerbell and Captain Hook.
Yeah, sure. Okay, reading on. The Red Book, the teleological perspective. The timing of the publication of the Red Book has interesting implications. Why was this account of Jung's inner encounter not published for about 100 years? It is my speculation that the spirit of his time was not quite primed to attend to the spirit of its depths. Perhaps there is Hermes at work in this timing of the introduction of the spirit of the depths implicit in Jung's opus. It took about 100 years to gradually prepare the culture to receive the gifts of the depths and its timeless wisdom. The timing of the publication is also synchronistic in that the technology has now matured for the material to be reproduced in its original aesthetic form. He's talking about the folio version of the Red Book. In India, it is said that the old souls have shamanic tendencies. They readily connect with the flow of the collective, and they dream for their clans and their cultures. Jesus, Moses, Mohammed, Buddha, uh, Muhammad, peace be upon him, Buddha, had such capacities. It is my postulate that Goethe and Carl Jung had shamanic proclivity. Jung had prophetic dreams foreshadowing the breakout of the World War One. His inner work in his own individuation opus also pointed in this direction. His writings have both a psychological and a visionary dimension. His Red Book, in particular, is an archetypal visionary piece of literature that channels the collective psyche's compensatory activation. The necessity of the death of the hero culture, the integration of its shadow, aligned with the anima and the feminine functions, and the emergence of the archetype of the rishi, the anchorite, the wise old man, the guru who serves, sacrifices, and guides others through the example of his lived life of service and sacrifice embodied in the image of Philemon. Philemon is not just the embodiment of Jung's number two personality, his self, but the guiding myth of our times, a gift from the spirit of the depths that offers us a GPS to navigate the spirit of our times. This entails an enantiodromia from the culture of self to an ethos of service, from consumerism to altruism. In my postulate that Philemon is a transitional archetype that that may make way for the activation of the Kali archetype that will do the necessary cleanup of the shadow dimensions of our present culture to make room for the new beginnings, the new Jerusalem that the dead sought in the scrutinies of Jung's Liber Novus. In its in its democratic liberal persona, the West has repressed its wotan longings, which have resurged in the current political climate. These repressed cultural complexes have returned with a vengeance and must be acknowledged and transmuted under the agency of the Philemon and Kali Sophia archetypes, so that we may be redeemed as a culture. Like Faust, our heroic culture must return to the realm of the mothers. This is exemplified in the goddess Inanna at the upper world, who must descend into the underworld of her twin sister, Erizkagal, the dark Kali, to be murdered and kept rotting unto the meat hook before being revived and restored to her potential for wholeness. Thus empowered, the feminine will take its rightful leadership in the global order. Once we retire this Faustian bargain with Wotan, we stand ready to be salvaged by the grace of the divine feminine, oft quoted by Jung from Goethe's Faust. Quote, gaze to me the saving gaze, contrite all and tender, for a blissful fate your ways thankfully surrender. May each noble mind be seen, eager for thy service. Holy Virgin, Mother, Queen, Goddess, pour thy mercies. Okay,
It's interesting here. It's a lot of this both and again. And when it starts to mention all the male prophets, Kali came to mind. And she storms. I mean, she's ultra powerful. But the reason is she's standing on Shiva, who is still and completely silent. So what happens is none of her force, when she braces against him, she doesn't peel out or skid the tires. All of her force moves. And so what's interesting here is instead of a patriarchal thing where look at all these male prophets, the idea of the figure in the ground came to mind. So, okay, we have the spoken male, and then we have this silent female that is the foundation and the ground that he braces against. So, in a sense, there's the seen and the unseen that I think are, again, it brings in the space between and the importance of not playing the either or masculine feminine game, but playing the both and place of creation game.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the YouTube chat at the moment. Kathy Kerr says, we stand our ground. There's nowhere to run. Absolutely. And so, people have started to understand that this new president, the once and current president, may not be up to any good for our country. And so the best we can do is stand our ground. And so I'm now symbolizing that by converting my public-facing wardrobe to entirely black, as you will see and as you do see today.
Well, and I still remain capital O observer because now I'm subscribed to all kinds of different left and right media, and it's two completely different stories and two people, two sides that completely hate the other. And I think what's interesting is Debbie's paragraph on the otherness keeps coming to mind, where I mean, God, it's like every time we have a different president, it's like, oh my God, the world's going to come to an end. It never has and never will. And I think what's interesting is I just see, one side saying, oh, it's all crime, and the other side saying, oh, look at how much he's getting done. And they both are so sovereign in their indoctrination. And it's interesting to me that people just won't let go. And I'm sure I'm guilty of it too. And my expectations are probably big blind spots. But subscribing to both sides of the media for the last whole year, that they both don't say anything the same, but they are almost opposites. And that tells me lies, lies, and more lies.
Well, I concur. And I actually met yesterday with my number 2 daughter, who is on the current president's side, and she was very interested to hear, as a mother, from me how my father and I survived um, a time of war. And so I have loved ones on both sides of this equation. Um, I do acknowledge that currently the right is doing backflips because they think how wonderful everything that's happening is. But I don't think we've seen anything like the blowback as yet. And my black attire at the moment is simply mourning the loss of our international goodwill, which both my wife and I have spent our lifetimes, our whole careers working on. And that is just being blown away with the loss of AID and other um, behaviors that are causing bad will in in the Middle East and the Far East. Um, and my prophecy is that we are being led into a war and a probable war between the United States and Iran. That's my expectation. I may be wrong. I hope I am. Um, and but I just see us reliving the 1960s, uh, the bad old days of the 1960s, and uh, we shall see. Um, my daughter claims that recruiting is up in the U.S. military, but that has to be a new phenomenon. Um, because up until the new year this year, it was only the Marine Corps that was making its recruiting goals, which it always does. But the other services have been hollowed out with personnel, and they need personnel. So if the recruiting is going to continue to thrive, which I doubt, um, then everything could be hunky dory. But my expectation is that if we get into a war, um, we're um, we're not going to have enough troops, and um, that means a reinstitution of the draft, which is um, prophesied in uh, Project 2025, um, where the current administration seems to want people who register for the draft, 18-year-olds, to have an MOS, to get an MOS at the same time. And I know, my daughter didn't know until yesterday, but I know that you don't get an MOS without probably at least 6 months service. I mean, even in the Marines, to be a rifleman, you don't earn the MOS of rifleman, uh, 0311, without, that's the numerical demonstrate or designation for a Marine rifleman. You don't earn that designation without about 6 months service. And so
And MOS is merit of service.
military occupational specialty. Okay, and there was a time in the late 80s when I was the head of standards branch, the reserve counterpart to the head of standards branch. So if we had gone to war while I was still on active duty, or active in the reserve, I would have taken the place of the head of standards branch as a reservist. And so I was being trained in that role. Unfortunately, I broke my leg and ended my military service at that point. But I did it for about a year, so I know something about the assignment of MOSs and how one earns them. And
You know what's
it's,
interesting?
yeah,
What's
go ahead.
what's interesting to me also about the recruitment numbers being down. One of the contributing factors is that 70+% of um, eligible age 17 to 22 individuals are not qualified based on obesity, health, or mental illness.
Right.
And so there's a whole, I mean, if pin it on seed oils, pin it on, you know, processed food. I mean, what's interesting is one thing I've learned doing the carnivore diet. At first, it was like vegetarian seemed alien, but really, what's happening is if I look at a bigger picture instead of my own dogma, it's that their elimination diets, they have both eliminated processed food in the middle. So what happens is, regardless of who is healthier, neither vegetarians or carnivores are eating crap food. And what's interesting about that is, to me, then it's just about taking out what was not healthy and then deciding what works for you with what you keep. And so, going all the way to say vegan seems too much, but vegetarian versus carnivore, I don't eat plants, but now I see no difference. And so I don't have a dogma like you're going to have this dietary civil war between people. It's find what works for you and don't. Now, to me, when I have the urge to judge, the first thing I should do is judge the urge to judge.
Well,
Like leave people alone.
we all have to do that, obviously. That's very important. We have to examine ourselves first. But I've lived long enough, about I guess 20 years more than you, um, Jordan, so that I have seen the cycle of history.
Mhm.
And I've actually lived it, in fact, because um, it was, it was my age group, specifically the class of 1968 from college, who ended up facing the brunt of the Vietnam War. And what we know from that history is that if there is a war, recruitment will fall off. People will not want to be recruited or want to go in the military. It's all well and good when everybody's wearing dress uniforms and marching around, pounding their chests, being tin soldiers and quote heroes. But um, when push comes to shove and your life is on the line, fewer recruits come. That's the reality. And yeah, sorry for the age card, Kathy. But that's the thing. And so it's too early to tell. We're in the first 100 days of this administration, but as I watch what is happening, and also the fact of the tensions that are in the Middle East, leaving aside, we won't even talk about Israel and Palestine, but um, about a year ago, Iran fired about 1,500 missiles at Israel in one go. And fortunately, the quote unquote Iron Dome um, worked, and all of those missiles and drones, et cetera, were shot down. And that is fortunate. And the same is happening in the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, and the Arabian Gulf, where American um, Navy ships are being attacked daily with drones and missiles, and those are getting shot down successfully. However, that has created so much tension in the deployed fleet that someone on one of our destroyers fired a missile at a blip on a radar screen, which turned out to be one of our F-18s, and shot down one of our own F-18s. Fortunately, the pilots got out and survived, but um, that's just an indicia of how tense things are in that part of the world right now. And
Yeah, that
so,
friendly fire. I mean,
yeah, I mean, it just shows that there was,
how
you
much
know,
stress they're under.
yeah, the
Because
stress that they're under.
they're
Exactly.
having to react instead of respond. And the problem with that is that you you make you make mistakes that can't be taken back.
Right. And, it only takes one lucky shot to start a war. Okay. The, as we know from the American Revolution, the shot that was heard around the world, which began the American Revolution. I guess it happened at Bunker Hill or something. I don't remember exactly which battle in the Revolution where that shot was fired, but um, we know that Iran is rearming. We can see the missiles coming in on the ships into Iranian ports, and so God help us one and all. God bless us one and all. God help us one and all. Um, because it's a very challenging time, and it's a challenging time for the U.S. military. It's a challenging time for the president, and it's a challenging time for all of us because um, nobody knows how things can happen in the future. And in the pre-days to World War II, um, the American psyche was not ready to enter World War II. We had a America First um, movement in the pre-World War II period, which said that we weren't going to go to war. And so President Roosevelt knew that it had to be, if we were attacked, then he could use that to enter the war. And of course, in the event, that's what happened. Uh, the World War II was going on for over 2 years before we entered the World War II. Um, and,
Started by Pearl Harbor. So
yeah, before Pearl Harbor, that was December 7th, 1941, but the war in Europe began on September 1st, 1939. Um, and um, and that's when Britain declared war on Germany, and the whole Battle of Britain and all that occurred, and most of the Blitz occurred before we entered the war. And it was only when we were attacked successfully that we could get the American people behind the war. And, to me, I see the current phase as leading up to that. I'm prepared for that in my
well,
own
and also
psyche.
we that that plane being shot down by us. Okay, that was a mistake. Okay, I get it.
Sure.
But one thing we have to be mindful of is the enemy within, so that we don't get a false flag, so that someone makes it look like someone else did something, and it was just someone on our side inciting, picking the fight.
Yeah,
So,
of course.
and
Of
then
course, that's
really,
true.
so there's, and that said, how would we know? I mean, so there's a problem of discernment and discretion, and that goes with this sapentiae, the wisdom here, the prudence and discernment and discretion of who's not playing fair for us. I
Well,
mean,
we'll
actually,
know when the president tells us, okay? Because inevitably, whoever's the president is going to tell us when it's bad enough to go to war, and then the Congress will vote for it. That's simple. And that's regardless of what side is in power.
well,
Um,
right. So I think being mindful of false flags from either side, where either side is trying to incite the riot within to go against something else, and
right,
against, so it's Debbie's paragraph of the otherness.
right. So I'm just saying, make good choices, everybody,
Yeah.
because uh, something if something happens, it's if your sons are in draft age. you're going to have to make good choices in order for them to survive a war. That's what my message was to my daughter. I was speaking to her as a mother. She's got four sons, and um, she said, "Oh, we've been talking about this at home. What to do with our own sons." And so, in the end, it's not going to be obesity that saves you from the draft, because if there is a draft, um, they're going to take anybody. They'll
Well,
be
yeah,
take anybody that can fill one of the jobs.
well, it's
So
interesting. You and your daughter's conversation. It's kind of conceptually in the air. I had a client I was talking to last week about boundaries and about responding rather than reacting. And sometimes that responding means doing nothing. And they were a little perplexed by it. And I said, part of it is you're getting insulted too easily. And I mean, the sticks and stones break my bones, but words can never hurt me. But think about it differently. That's not just an attitude. It's your opinions don't pay my bills. And
yeah.
when you look at it that way, I don't have to care what you think. But
Well, that's right.
when I
And
have empathy, then I listen instead of trying to interpret. So I have to hear what you say. And what's interesting about that is I find it secures a whole lot less conflict because you're not up for jumping. You're not waiting for your turn to talk. And that translates not waiting for your turn to fight. I mean, so that you're comfortable in your own skin instead of pushing it off on other people and trying to find some kind of validation that they're going to accept your
yeah.
opinion. I mean,
Well, nobody wants to fight a war. Nobody.
right.
There's nobody in the U.S. Armed Forces who wants to fight a war. Uh, and and it's an unfortunate truth of our time that somebody has to be prepared to do it. And if we didn't, bullies around the world would um, walk all over us. And unfortunately, bullies are born into every generation. And so, we have to decide who the bully is today. But what I'm saying is that we need to be very, very cognizant of what can happen in our own families if we have sons who are um, the draft age. We need to be concerned, especially whether they can survive. And then the question is, how do you make the good choices, the right choices to survive? And in both my father's case and my case, we survived by serving in the military, but getting in um, sort of early so that we could pick and choose what our jobs were. And as a result of that, we were relatively safe. But if you're drafted and you're going to end up as a rifleman, you're not going to be that safe. Now, that said, even in Vietnam, we lost about 4% of all lieutenants who went to Vietnam as second lieutenants in the Marine Corps. One of them being my roommate from the basic school, who went and was killed. But even in Vietnam, which was a pretty hot and heavy war, um, about 4% were killed. Uh, and so your chances of survival in any role are pretty good, um, because the powers that be, whoever they are, will try to end a war, ideally. And so, um, I'm not yet saying that my black is mourning for the people who will die in the future in a war. I'm not prepared to say that because, a lot of people, and I mean millions of us, um, know what can happen and will want to avoid it. And hopefully, um, we will avoid it. And I hope my concern is not validated. But at the same time, I'm wearing black because I am mourning um, the loss of American goodwill internationally, which my wife and I have worked on in our own ways um, internationally for our entire careers, and that has been lost in a puff of smoke. And so that I can mourn. And you don't have to agree with me that it's something to be mourned, but I don't think we're safer if we create antagonism internationally. Um, that's my position.
So
Okay, we
I think the
go ahead.
concept to me with the wisdom piece, the concept I'm seeing, I mean, all bullies, all cruel people are weak. And there's a machismo, whether it's male or female, that goes along with the posturing. It's like this, it's a cry for attention that I'm so powerful. Whereas then you look at the leaders who are silent, like the alpha wolf, the whole myth of that, the alpha wolf is in the back at the end, and the young and the elderly are in the front to set the pace to make sure they're not run too hard. The strengthy middle aged wolves are in the middle, and so is then the beta. So you get a whole locomotive and caboose, but the caboose is really driving the train. So I think the difference between a bully and a leader is very, very important, because it's like a difference between a manager and a leader. A manager will do what's profitable, and a leader will do the right thing. So I
Yeah,
think there's a discerning, again, back to discernment, prudence that's mentioned in this biblical passage. Um, Back to prudence and discernment, and prudence not being prude, prudence being reserved enough to listen to make good decisions. And I think that's an important. The word prudence in modern society is often just shortened to prude, and the reality is it's more of a reserve, um, that everything in moderation, including moderation sometimes. So understanding the intensities and the cycles, um, heck, even of the weather, it's never stable. So it's the kind of thing where, what can we change? Well, it seems to me easier when, instead of trying to change others, you change yourself, get back to who you are. And I think that's the wisdom of the Sapientia, where, um, in this sense, the God figure always has her wisdom, Sophia Hoptma, right there by his side. So it's the silent support to brace against.
right. Okay, so a world is made of 8.7 billion people, or 8.5 billion people right now. And we are only individuals. And so we're mainly talking about being individuals at this point. Um, and so, I'm going to continue to wear black because of my perspective on what's happened to my life's work and my wife's life's work. Um, and I hope it doesn't come to more than that. We're currently in the honeymoon period of a new administration, and uh, we don't know whether it's going to be good or bad for the United States. Obviously, if the dream of having a Riviera in Gaza and an end to a peaceful end to the war in Ukraine were to come to fruition, yeah, that'd be good in some way. Okay. But um, but the problem is, what do we have to do to get to that point? And that's non-trivial in both cases. Okay. And
And the whole Gaza thing too, the Riviera idea, it reminds me too, it's follow the money, follow the money, follow the money. Because for example,
sure.
Soho in New York, the artists pioneered it, they found it, they made it. And then all of a sudden people come in and the prices go up and the founders, the artists, get priced right out of their own home. So there's a piece of who does the dirty work, who finds the thing, and then who comes in and capitalizes on the thing. So I look at it a little more dispassionately, and part of that is because I'm skeptical of most developers because there's a whole, you know, scrape out all the native trees and then name the streets after them. I mean, it's like, Aspen Court and this is not an aspen in the neighborhood, and so it's interesting.
Name streets out after heroes and wars.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's an old urban design joke of oh yeah,
Yeah.
go rape the land and scrape the trees, but then name the streets after them, and so as if that the streets names are the names on the gravestones of nature that you scraped off.
Okay. So I think we've adequately addressed uh, these
Yeah,
concerns for
horse is
uh,
dead. Stop kicking it.
pardon.
The horse is dead. We can
For
stop.
now anyway, I'm cautiously monitoring the YouTube chat at the moment, but I've put onto the YouTube chat the name of the next essay that we will be reading. Um, and we are reading from Jung's Red Book for Our Time, Searching for Soul Under Postmodern Conditions. And it's edited by Mary Stein and Thomas Arst. And this is volume 1 of 5 volumes. These are all very, very good essays and very meaningful essays. So I urge you to read all 5 volumes. Um, and we are slowly doing that in this group. Um, and we're nearing the end of this one. I think we have one more essay after Hyang Chen. Hyang Chen is a person who lives in well, this is silly because and this is what happens with old age. Something skips your mind and you can't get it back. And I know how to get it back, but I don't have the time, the luxury right now to go search for it. But uh, let me try to find the
But
write up about Heiyang Shen here for a moment.
I think there's the whole how occupied is your mind too? Because there's times now when I'm busy and I'll decide to go do something, even if it's just fill refill a coffee cup or something. I'll stand up and then I'll look around and go, what was I going to do? Because there was the part of it, I was so trained in a one and done. Why make lists? Just do the task. Don't explain it, just do the task. But I laugh that now, sometimes if I think about it, I better write it down because if I think about it, I think I've already done it.
Right.
I forget.
So Heiyang Shen is a Jungian analyst who is in the process of translating all of Jung's collected works into Chinese. And he lives in Macau. Macau is the word that I was looking for. Macau is a former Portuguese colony, which is about, I think, 80 miles south of Hong Kong. And so it was a place where there were um, places of gambling, casinos, and that sort of thing. And so it was very popular when you went to Hong Kong to make a day trip over to Macau, so that you could and you could go by hydrofoil, and then in Macau you could bet and make money that way theoretically. Of course, the houses always wins in casinos. So in any case, Heung
They have,
Shung, pardon?
they have nice stamps.
Yeah, and they have nice stamps. That's true. And so Heung Shun uh, is a product of Macau, but he's a university professor, PhD university professor, and a Jungian analyst, very respected one. And also, we did interview him for this YouTube channel. So if you put his name, which I provided in the YouTube chat, uh, into the search engine for this YouTube channel, you will find that interview with Heong Shun. Um, and I'll just read his background. Heung Shun, PhD, professor of psychology at South China Normal University and the City University of Macau. He's a Jungian analyst, a member of IAAP, and sand play therapist, founding president of the Chinese Federation for Analytical Psychology and sand play therapy, the main organizer of the International Conference of Analytical Psychology and Chinese Culture between 1998 and 2015. Speaker at the Aranos Conferences, 1997 to 2007, for the Psychology of the Heart, and Fulbright Scholar in Residence, 1996 and 97. Heung Shun has published 60 papers and 12 books. He is the chief editor for the Chinese translation of the collected works of C.G. Jung and chief editor of the Chinese Journal of Analytical Psychology. He and his group set up 70 workstations at orphans and earthquake zones in the mainland of China for psychological aids, with the project named the Golden Heart, the Garden of the Heart and Soul. And his email address is shenheong@hotmail.com. Okay, so now we're going to read his essay, which is Why is the Red Book Red? A Chinese Reader's Reflections. Jung's Liber Novus is red, and for me, as a Chinese person, this color is so touching and moving. When I first held the Red Book in my hands in 2009, my immediate thought was, why is it red? Also, inside the book, when you open it and look at the first page of Liber Primus, you find a bold drawing of the letter D in a special shade of red to introduce the chapter, the way of what is to come. After that, almost every letter at the start of sentences or paragraphs is similarly colored in a shade of red. Then we find the mythical figure Izdubar, clothed in red, with blue armor, image number 36. The red one is red, of course, and the image of Philemon, along with his clothing and his wings, image 154, and the atmospheres surrounding him are almost totally colored in red. So red is not only the color of the book's cover, it is also the color of important contents within the book. What does this signify? In Sono Shamdasani's introduction, we discover a hint of the meaning of this omnipresent color, red. Carrie Baines, who was asked by Jung to make a fresh transcription of the Red Book's text in the early 1920s, kept a notebook in the form of unsent letters to Jung. In one of them, she writes, quote, in another book of Meyrink's, The White Dominican, you said he made use of exactly the same symbolism that had come to you in the first vision that revealed to your unconscious. Furthermore, you said he had spoken of a red book which contained certain mysteries, and the book that you are writing about the unconscious, you have called the Red Book, unquote. Comments, Jordan?
I think it's interesting. This goes back to reacting versus responding, where sometimes we don't need to interpret and embellish. The truth is right there in front of us. So instead of, my perspective is true and your perspective is true, but the reality is neither are truth. And it's like that cylinder image I have, where if you project it the shadow one way, it's a circle, and you project a shadow the other way, it's a rectangle. But the truth is the cylinder. So I think here the truth being, look at the red. Like, just start with the red, and the fact that it's the calligraphic, like illustrated monk Bible passages where the first letter of the chapter is always an artfully done thing, where the inception, the start is reveled in there. And so I think what's interesting is it's kind of like cinema, where they change the music. That's adding another start to another cadence of another chapter. So I think that it's interesting here. I think just simple, the red looked into by Hayom Shen um, is really poignant to start with, because it's one of those masterful command of the obvious that a lot of people, go into the what does it mean? No, just what does it experience? What does it look like? How does it feel? And then the red there coming from, their flag is red with the gold. So in that sense, there's that alchemical connection of just color sense. Um,
Yeah.
so
And
he's celebrating starts, I think, and then starts that lead to perennial.
right. And just point out the painting that I gave to my daughter. I gave my daughter a print of my large painting, uh, the Vision of America #1. And so I couldn't afford to frame the original because it would cost $1,000 to frame, because it's 40 inches wide and 25.5 inches tall. Um, but but I did print it. So #1 of 10 in 1/4 size. So in other words, half the width and half the height. So this is a print that's 20 inches wide and 12.5 inches tall, or 12 3/4 inches tall, something like that. And so I had that printed as a gift to my daughter, and further prints. If somebody wanted one, I could probably get it for you for about $250. But the original, I wouldn't sell for less than like 10,000. But since I worked on it for a year, but anyway, in any case, I've done this work for myself and as gifts for my children, which seem to be well received by them. So I'll just show you um, again this piece, just as a reminder, because it does have a lot of red in it. And so here is the piece, Vision of America #1, the completed one. And there's a lot of red in it. And if I go, let's see, if I make it smaller, then I might be able to go to the next one. Okay, so this is from a different angle, but as you see, red goes right up the middle of this painting, right exactly up the middle. And when I was thinking about it, I was thinking that red represented the British coming in from New England, and red is the color of England. And so that, and then I show the red that represents England comes right across America, all the way across. And that's what I was consciously thinking, but anyway, unconsciously, um, it it's interesting that red keeps appearing. And of course, Mao Zedong's little red book, which had his various aphorisms. I once did when I was in my senior year of college, uh, I did a term paper where I compared Mao's Little Red Book to the Analects of Confucius, and what I found was that they matched perfectly, and so I did them side by side in my paper, showing that what Mao said and what Confucius had said are basically the same thing. And I got an A+ for that paper, so I was very pleased with the
Well,
result.
it makes a good statement of you can use anything for anything. And
Yeah,
and what's interesting about that is, there are deer ticks and there's dog ticks and then there's politics. So, you know, he basically ripped the concepts and used them for a whole different purpose. Which pick your tools wisely is what it's like.
right. Okay, and so also there's Becca Tarnas, back when the Red Book first came out. Becca Tarnas started to talk about, and there's a video on YouTube of the first, at the Library of Congress, the first introduction of the Red Book. And Becca Tarnas served on the panel along with James Hillman and others. And she pointed out the comparison between Jung's Red Book and Tolkien's Red Book.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so J.R. or Tolkien. So
Well, she's an
reading.
evolutionary astrologer as well as a psychotherapist.
So yeah. So Jung was familiar with Mehring's works, such as the Golem, the Green Face, and the White Dominican. In Shamdasani's footnote to Carrie Baines's unsent letter, we find the following important information about Mehring's mystical novel. Quote, the founding father informs the hero of the novel, Christopher, that whoever possesses the Cinnabar Red Book, the plant of immortality, the awakening of the spiritual breath, and the secret of bringing the right hand to life, will dissolve with the core. Will dissolve with the core. It is called the Cinnabar Book because, according to ancient belief in China, that red is the color of the garments of those who have reached the highest stage of perfection and stayed behind on earth for the salvation of mankind. End quote. The White Dominican was Mehring's most esoteric novel, and it draws on the wisdom of a number of mystical traditions, the most important of which is Chinese Taoism. Following the way, the Tao, Christopher, the hero of the novel, joins, quote, the living chain, unquote, that stretches to infinity. For the Chinese Taoists, Cinnabar Red is regarded as the color of life and eternity. Cinnabar red, or vermilion, is also called Chinese red. In China, the first documented use of the mineral cinnabar for a color pigment occurred in the Yangshao culture around 5000 to 4000 BCE. It was used to paint ceramic bowls for ritual ceremonies from ancient times. The cinnabar was regarded as the color of blood and thus the color of life, of the heart and soul. When Chinese objects colored with cinnabar were exported to Europe in the 17th century, it was one of the most expensive pigments, almost as precious as gold leaf. At the time, it was used only for the most important decorations in illuminated manuscripts. Carl Jung wrote in the epilogue to the Red Book, quote, "I always knew that these experiences contained something precious, and therefore I knew of nothing better than to write them down in a precious, that is to say, costly book, and to paint the images that emerged through reliving it all as well as I could," unquote. The Chinese characters for cinnabar red, vermilion, are Zhu Hong. The first character is Zhu, referencing a special tree with a red heart. This is its original form in the Chinese oracles. He shows its form, which I can't really show you here, but it's in the book. The paint at the center indicates the red heart of the tree. In ancient times, the pens used by emperors and the great Taoists were made of this wood. The second character, which means red, is Hong. This character is a combination of fine silk, mi, and skill, gong. The image of fine silk is associated with the silkworm and the mulberry tree. The ancient Chinese people worshipped the mulberry tree because it was valued as the tree of life, or the mother tree, symbolizing the archetypal feminine. The Chinese character for skill is the original symbol for shaman. Um, in the meaning of the original symbol and attested by the classical Chinese dictionary, the shaman is one who can communicate between heaven and earth, who can service the invisible unconscious realm and can dance to invite the spiritual God or the soul to be present. Another name for cinnabar is in Chinese, is Dan, uh, whose original character in the oracles was, it shows the character. The meaning of Dan in Chinese is related to alchemy and to Taoist practice. It is called the cinnabar field, where essence and spirit are stored. Um, as some translations express it, it is the elixir field or the energy center. For Taoist yoga, this is the focal point for the transmutation of the three treasures: Jing, which is essence, Qi, which is energy, and Shun, which is spirit. Dan is also a symbol or word for the heart. Also, Dan is cinnabar red, is a name for dragon's blood and is a special ingredient in traditional medicine. In fact, it is a toxic mineral, mercury sulfide, HGS, but it possesses a healing function when combined with other herbs, as the five elements theory shows. According to the herbal classic of Shen Nong, cinnabar is taken as jade in the world of goods and has the functions of keeping and nurturing the spirit and of making content and secure the hongpo, the soul. So the characters and symbols related to the Chinese name for cinnabar red or vermilion convey important symbolic meanings of great significance. C.G. Jung, who studied the I Ching and Chinese characters, once expressed his special feeling for Chinese characters as readable archetypes. Comments here?
Yeah, it's interesting to me too. Chinese vermilion is such a wonderful color. I used to use it all the time in my oil paints. But what's interesting I didn't know until last year that cinnabar is red and is the Chinese vermilion. But I was very fond of using the Chinese vermilion and cinnabar green light, which is kind of a mossy. So it's in a sense almost it's either tertiary or complementary to Chinese vermilion. One being so hot, so passionate, so alive, the other being so cool and so silent. So it's interesting to me that I now see why I was so attracted to using Chinese vermilion, aka cinnabar, and cinnabar green light. And I remember last year someone said cinnabar, and I thought, oh yeah, it's such a great mossy color. And then said, what the hell are you talking about? Cinnabar's red. And I'm like, no, no, no. And I pulled up on the internet. Well, cinnabar green light is completely different than cinnabar, and it's basically two adjectives on green that make the opposite of the red, which is the origin. So I think what's interesting between the two, there's a transformation piece of cinnabar red versus cinnabar green light that I think applies here, because then if I look at how Jung contrasted colors, his greens were often not like Hooker's green or Viridian, those dark. They were often more the mossy, and which just feels alive. So it's a different kind of hot life and cool life that I think he's going through the characters in the red, and he's basically given us a history of just that color. And I think what's interesting about that is it all applies straight off to how to work with the red book. I mean, pick a detail and just dive in.
Yeah. And some of our followers on YouTube are noting that it's amazing how so much of what we study is about duality and the two-sidedness of things.
Yeah, and that's my big soapbox. Is instead of the duality of either or, I look at the inclusion of both and. So in a sense, being comfortable with the not knowing while daily getting all my stuff done. So it's not sitting there, lazily as it would be. It's um, accomplishing priorities, but not being a stickler to the plan I had. The goal may not change, but the way I get there will.
Yeah. And just thinking here.
Which I think that speaks to Debbie's otherness. Instead of an either or, to me, if something doesn't have both, I find it relatively ridiculous, and
Yeah,
I,
and
I won't even pick it up, because the black and the white and the white and the black, just in the yin yang, um, even astrological symbols. The symbol of the sun is a circle with the dot in the middle, but it could also be thought of to be identity, which is Saturn, and then it's a top view of this planet Saturn with its rings, and just how a visual is utilized makes all the difference.
right. And I'm just thinking because it so happens that I'm a Chinese scholar. Thanks the Marine Corps for that.
Right.
And I think of the characters for Nihon, which means Japan. Nihon is the Japanese word for Japan. And in Nihon, the Ni is sun, and Hon is trees. And literally, the image is the sun over the trees. That's obviously, fire over trees, which are burnable. And then the insight of the sun in the trees is very interesting. I mean, when you think about the sun showing through the trees at dawn or dusk, is very interesting metaphor. Okay, let us go on. Translated into Chinese literally, the red book is red book, Hong Shu, and Liber Novus is new book. The original symbol for new in Chinese is, and they shows the symbol, which means getting wood, maybe the wood of the special tree with a red heart, and first character for the cinnabar red mineral in Chinese. Synchronistically, new in Chinese, Xin, has the same pronunciation as the word for heart, Xin. So the Liber Novus, the new book in the Chinese cultural context, also has the meaning of the book of the heart. The image and meaning of the heart occupies a central meaning in Chinese culture and language, as well as in Chinese philosophy, such as found in the Qing, Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. Based on them, we have inaugurated the psychology of the heart for our Jungian practice in China. And I think it's very interesting that with the new controversy about TikTok being a Chinese company, I found that the Chinese answer to to TikTok is called Xin Hong Shu, which literally means new red book. Xin Hong Shu means new red book.
That's interesting. And I think what's interesting is the red book translated into red book, Chinese, same as Japanese. They don't use articles. There is no the red book. It's red book. And so what happens is it's almost a martial thing where they get straight to the point. The article, or a red book, the red book, they just say red book. And what happens is, to me, it's straight to the point, and it's actually not truncated. The English with the or a red book is more embellished and actually carries the unnecessary with it. And so this is an interesting thing, just with the fact that they don't use articles. He got straight to the red in the red book, or in red book. So psychology of the heart. I mean, heart.
So I can actually show you these characters because I decided to put my vision of America on Xin Hong Shu, and it came back to me somewhat changed in the sense that they put the words Xin Hong Shu in on the painting. And so I'll just show you that because it's kind of interesting. So let's see. Okay, so Xin Hong Shu is here. And apparently in English, because they don't think Americans can understand Xin Hong Shu, so they call it red note. But it's actually quite fun as long as you don't say anything inappropriate about the government of China. It's kind of interesting to see how it parallels TikTok. But here in the corner is the Xin Hong Shu logo there, and then this in Chinese says this is my ID on red note, on what Americans are calling red note, which is actually a small red book, basically. So it doesn't mean new red book, it means small red book. This character is small here, or a little red book, like the name of Mao Zedong's book was called The Little Red Book. So Richard makes an interesting comment here. He says the thing about the spiritual life is that those who have true spirituality will choose to let the world go by and not desire much from it. And others who manipulate the spirit realm use it to acquire things. Um, and I just make a comment about um, one of my colleagues who um, is a born again pastor, a Christian pastor, and if I say something about why I'm wearing black, for example, he'll say, "Oh, I leave it to Jesus," and I always want to retort, uh, "Well, you're leaving it to a man who died um, more than or about 2,000 years ago, and that's quite passive. And Jesus lives on in our hearts, and therefore, um, if Jesus lives, he has to live through our works, it seems to me. Um,
Yeah, I
and
think
that's more active.
I really like that. There's an important distinction, I think, between passivity, passive, and surrender. And surrender, I mean, dharmically, um, is actually living the truth. There's the silence of it is what it is,
Yeah,
whereas passive is often just even omissive avoidance.
yeah,
Like, and I think, you can duck a punch, you can take a punch, you can also just change how things are working. And so I think it's like driving a car. I'm not in control, I'm navigating. Now, I may not want to get out of control, but the thing is, I'm not controlling the car, I'm navigating it because it has so many other moving parts under the hood that I don't see.
yeah,
So that's not control, it's operation, it's navigation. And I think it comes into, like when you say passive, the importance of how to utilize a verb and understand which verb to use.
yeah.
Because passive and avoidance are not surrender, they're kind of given up, which is different.
Yeah, I mean, if you leave it up to Jesus, then you're going to be following somebody else's path. Is
And again, other
yeah,
people's opinions don't pay my bills. So
yeah,
I better get into mine instead of
right.
handing myself over to someone else. There's a lack of sovereignty, I think, that um, people, in a sense, afraid to step up into
Yeah,
their own self
yeah.
or just as themselves. That doesn't mean you have to do anything particular. I mean, but
Yeah, correct. I mean, if Jesus is going to work in the world, he he has to work through us. His spirit has to work through us, and it's just as simple as that.
and
And
there's
he
also,
knew that. By the way, he knew that.
yeah, and I think that brings up the point of, well, how do we name things, and are we all actually talking about the same darn thing? And but
Exactly.
at the same time,
Sure.
when we use different words, we're going a different route, so
Yeah.
we will have different experiences. You just
Right.
kind
And so that's what this article is about. So translated into Chinese, literally, the red book is red book, Hong Shu, and Liber Novus is, did I read this already?
yeah,
This,
we finished.
okay. So red is the color of the heart and blood, and it also color of the liver as well. In the 13th chapter of Liber Secundus, titled Sacrificial Murder, the protagonist describes his encounter with the liver. A shrouded woman tells him, "You know what the liver means, and you ought to perform the healing act with it." After he eats the liver, Jung meets his soul. On January 2nd, 1927, Jung had his Liverpool dream. In the center was a pool, and on it stood a single tree, a magnolia, in a shower of reddish blossoms. It was as though the tree stood in the sunlight and was at the same time the source of light. When Jung spoke of this dream, he said, I had a vision of unearthly beauty, and that is why I was able to live at all. Liverpool is the pool of life. The liver, according to an old view, is the seat of life, that which makes to live. The liver is the seat of life, just as in the Chinese traditional medicine, the yin yang and the five elements theory. The liver, whose nature is wood, feeds the heart, whose nature is fire. And so it makes it possible for a person to live. At the same time, according to Chinese tradition, the liver is the place of the Hun, cloud ghost, the soul, or anima in Jung's terminology. Liverpool, the real city, contains the first, the oldest, and largest population, largest Chinese population in Europe. Another synchronicity. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
Um,
this
and of
I never
course,
even I never even noticed the word liver in Liverpool. I mean, from a perspective of thinking liver and pool, I always had this kind of empty definition. It's like, oh, it's just a name. But I never thought, what does it mean in this way? And it's interesting. It's again the
yeah,
color
and
red, so big
historically,
and
it must have had a reason for that name, I would think.
yeah, and I mean so big and so there. I didn't even see it. It's just obvious now that snake in the grass. Just,
And by the way, Jung never visited Liverpool. However, because of that dream, there is a bust of Jung in Liverpool, which is kind of a central attraction in the annual Art Fest in Liverpool. And it attracts, I think, about 250,000 people a year to this one weekend in Liverpool. So, so for Jung, this Liverpool dream is so important for his understanding of the self, for the individuation process, and for his life. He writes in Memories, Dreams, Reflections. This dream brought with it a sense of finality. I saw that here the goal had been revealed. One could not go beyond the center. The center is the goal, and everything is directed toward the center. Through this dream, I understood that the self is a principle and archetype of orientation and meaning. Therein lies its healing function. Then he continues, quote, for me, this insight signified an approach to the center and therefore to the goal. Out of it emerged a first inkling of my personal myth. After this dream, I gave up drawing or painting mandalas. The dream depicted the climax of the whole process of development, unquote. In The Secret of the Golden Flower, one finds the town plan that depicts the scene of the Liverpool dream. As Sono Shamdasani notes, the sketch is the basis of image 159 in the Red Book, linking the dream with the mandala. This image is titled Window on Eternity. In his commentary on The Secret of the Golden Flower, Jung offers a written description of this picture. Quote, a luminous flower in the center with stars rotating about it. Around the flower, walls with 8 gates. The whole, the whole conceived as a transparent window. Jung mentions the mandala image and the Liverpool dream in many places of his writings and seminars as for instance in psychology of the Kundalini Yoga and Window on Eternity from the Red Book. From the Red Book by C.G. Jung, edited by Shamdasani, blah, blah, blah. Okay. He says, I thought very well of myself, that I was able to express myself like that. My marvelous center here, I am right in my heart. Now Liverpool is the center of life. Liver is the center of life. And I am not the center. In Memory Streams Reflections, Jung recalls that after his Liverpool dream, he paused, painted a second picture, likewise a mandala, with a golden castle in the center. I think you can comment while I can bring up these images.
Yeah, what came to me immediately was the geometric concept that I equate with identity, where the center is not necessarily in the middle. It's where the focus or the goal is. The middle's the middle, and that's dimensional, but the center is an identity, living piece. And what's interesting about this Liverpool with the mandala in the middle, there are also 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 little centers around it, and then there's multiple intersections or centers above and below. So whether I'm looking at it as a single thing or plural, or better said, multi-nucleic, there's a nucleus in the cell, or here there are nuclei, multiple centers.
Yeah.
So in that sense, the center is not necessarily in the middle. The center is where we focus. So that way he saw the goal clearly because he got to center, as it would be.
Okay, so here I have them both, so I will share them. First of all, here's the Liverpool dream. Okay. Yep. So you're now looking at the Liverpool dream, and it's quite a fascinating painting, actually. And it was sort of the central. Go ahead.
Wow, I didn't even think about this. We're talking about red being cinnabar, and then
Yeah.
cinnabar green light. The lighter green pigment in those points off of at each of those 4 corners, that lighter color is cinnabar green light. So he has the Chinese vermilion and the cinnabar green light in there. I never made that connection here. Wow.
And plus, I wonder whether he made the connection when he was painting it. But and the other picture that was mentioned here is the picture of the city, and he commented on it that it seemed so Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it does.
Right. All right. So
that kind of calligraphy.
yeah, so this seems quite like a Chinese city. And Jung in Memory Streams Reflections said that, why does this seem so Chinese? And very shortly after the time that he painted this, he met Richard Wilhelm, who had been a missionary in China for 60 years. And Wilhelm wanted him to write a commentary on The Secret of the Golden Flower. And that's where he made the connection to the Chinese. He also made the connection to alchemy at that time, also because of Wilhelm. And unfortunately, Wilhelm died about 6 months later, so he didn't get to expand out on these ideas with the Chinese. But Heiyang Shang is doing that, and that's one of the reasons for reading his essay.
You know, what's interesting about this composition of the city piece, the diagonals, it appears close to the top triangle being 60 degrees, the bottom triangle being 60 degrees. That leaves 150 degrees on either side to make, actually, no, it doesn't. It makes 2247. Hold on. Yeah, 120. Yeah, 120 degrees. My math was wrong initially, but 60 at 60, and then 120, 1 plus 2 is 3. So the larger is numerologically half of the smaller, so that you get the paradox going on. Even in, he didn't use 90-degree angles, and astrologically, the 60 degrees is you're getting what's called a sextile, and it's a dance of relationship. And the 120 is just the two together.
I'm going to put this back up here when I read this next paragraph. Okay, so of this mandala, Jung recalls, quote, "When it was finished, I asked myself, why is this so Chinese? I was impressed by the form and the choice of colors, which seemed to me Chinese, although there was nothing outwardly Chinese about it. Yet that was how it affected me. It was a strange coincidence that shortly afterward I received a letter from Richard Wilhelm enclosing the manuscript of a Taoist alchemical treatise entitled The Secret of the Golden Flower, with a request that I write a commentary on it. We know that, as with the Liverpool dream, the secret of the golden flower was very important to him. Jung says, quote, "I devoured the manuscript at once, for the text gave me undreamed of confirmation of my ideas about the mandala and the circumambulation of the center. That was the first event which broke through my isolation. I became aware of an affinity I could establish, ties with something and someone." Jung took his meeting with with Wilhelm to be one of the most significant events of his life. For Jung, Wilhelm, through his translations of classic Chinese texts, had inoculated the West with the living germ of the Chinese spirit. In the Memories, Dreams, Reflections, Jung says, quote, "In remembrance of this coincidence, this synchronicity, I wrote underneath a picture which had made so Chinese an impression upon me, quote, in 1928, when I was painting this picture showing the garden well-fortified castle, Richard Wilhelm in Frankfurt sent me the 1,000-year-old Chinese text on the yellow castle, the germ of the immortal body. In the Red Book, we can see the detail of the picture with Jung's note, quote, "Why is this so Chinese?" unquote. We can still ask the same question about the color red of the Red Book. Chinese is not just a name for some people or a country, just as Chinese medicine cannot be understood as the medicine of China. The core or the secret of the meaning of Chinese lies in the character, Zhong, equilibrium. The original form of the character of Zhong for the name of Chinese or China is Zhong. The basic meaning of Zhong is core, the center, the heart, the right time, the state of equilibrium and harmony. It is also the symbol for high noon. The name of the red color of the red book in Chinese is Zhuhong, which besides cinnabar red or vermilion and the tree with the red heart is also associated with the color of the sun at the moment of high noon. Now, just mention that this character, Jung, is also one of the two characters in the word China. In Chinese, it's Zhongguo, and it means literally middle kingdom or middle country. And so Zhongguo is how you say China in Mandarin.
And two, the composition, if I look at it astrologically, the 60-degree triangles, that's a sextile, and that's harmonious compatibility and opportunity. So there's a goal piece. And then the 120-degree angles are trines, which is positive, harmonious, natural talent and a flow of energy between the objects.
Yeah.
So there's the city, and then there's the liver and the heart and the circulation of the city. So I think even astrologically, this composition really dials into that red of
Right. Okay. So it's getting late-ish. So what I want to do is read through the rest of this essay quickly and then wrap it up. But we still have 4 pages, so I'm going to rip through it right now.
Okay.
So Zhong, equilibrium, is the main principle of the I Ching. As the second line and the fifth line of each hexagram, it is the center of or meaning for the inner and the outer trigrams. So Jung conveys the meaning of the third, the balance of yin and yang, and the transcendent function. That is exactly the meaning of Zhongyi, Chinese medicine, which uses the equilibrium principle for treatment. The image of the character of the great commentary of the I Ching is closely related to the right side of the image for the color red, Hong. This image conveys the symbolic meaning of knotted point, the core and the middle numbers of the trigrams. Chinese culture is a culture of Zhong, equilibrium, and the word Zhuzhong is a term for the basic Taoist principle. As Lao Tzu says, all things carry yin and have yang, being harmony by equilibrium of vacancy. Zhong, equilibrium, is the foundation of the Confucius tradition, just as as is Jungian, the doctrine of the mean. When joy, anger, sorrow, and happiness are not revealed, they are Zhong in the mean. When they are revealed, they are He in harmony. Zhong is the base of everything, and He is the right way to reveal everything. If Zhong and He are achieved, the world would run smoothly. For Buddhism, the middle way, as Buddha describes the noble eightfold path that leads to liberation, also uses Zhong and Tao in Chinese. The Red Book shows Jung searching diligently for the heart and soul of the middle way. And the Tao, the self and individuation. For instance, on June the 24th, 1914, Jung writes, quote, "In the night, my soul spoke to me," quote, "the greatest comes to the smallest," unquote. Following 1 year of silence after this, Jung saw an osprey seize a big fish and rise into the skies, and he heard a voice say, "That is a sign that what is below is born upward." The image and meaning of the Chinese character zhong, equilibrium, and the right side of the character hong, red, imply precisely the union of below and above. As one reads the seven sermons of the dead delivered by Philemon, one feels the meaning of the Tao or Buddhism, as in the teaching, quote, "I begin with nothingness. Nothingness is the same as fullness. In infinity, full is as good as empty. Nothingness is empty and full." In two essays in analytical psychology, Jung says, "I might invoke Lao Tzu and appropriate his concept of Tao, the middle way and creative center of all things." In Psychological Types, Jung quotes several passages from Lao Tzu to explain the uniting symbol as for example, quote, "There was something formless yet complete that existed before heaven and earth, without sound, without audience, without sound, without substance, dependent on nothing, unchanging, all pervading, unfailing. One may think of it as the mother of all things under heaven. This true name we do not know. Way is the name that we give it." Whoa, sorry, I'm hypnotizing myself. Could you read on, Jordan?
Sure. And note that mother of all things under heaven, Juno, is the mother of heaven. So
Yeah.
way is the name that we give it. Jung says of this, unfortunately, our Western mind, lacking all culture in this respect, has never yet devised a concept, nor even a name for the union of opposites through the middle path, that most fundamental item of inward experience, which could respectively be set against the Chinese concept of Tao. It is at once the most individual fact and the most universal, the most legitimate fulfillment of the meaning of the individual's life. For Jung, Tao is the right way, the reign of law, the middle road between the opposites, freed from them and yet uniting them in itself. The purpose of life is to travel this middle road and never to deviate towards the opposites. The aim of Taoist ethics is to find deliverance from the cosmic tension of opposites by a return to Tao. On the last page of the Red Book, in the epilogue Jung wrote in 1959, he mentions Richard Wilhelm and the Golden Flower. Jung writes, "I worked on this book for 16 years. My acquaintance with alchemy in 1930 took me away from it. The beginning of the end came in 1928 when Wilhelm sent me the text of The Golden Flower, an alchemical treatise. Here the contents of this book found their way into actuality, and I could no longer continue working on it." In his Richard Wilhelm in Memoriam address, Jung says, "Wilhelm accomplished his mission in every sense of the word. Not only did he make accessible to us the cultural treasure of ancient China, but as I have said, he brought us its spiritual root, the root that has remained alive all these thousands of years, and planted it in the soil of Europe. According to the law of enantiodromia, so well understood by the Chinese, the end of one phase is the beginning of its opposite. Even though the Red Book is closed, the spirit of it continued, as people believe that Bollingen is the continuation of the Red Book, the Liber Cordis." Jung's acquaintance with alchemy and the confrontation with the world also represent the continuation. All of these representations of the individuation process, all of these are representations of the individuation process, which convey a revelation to us and to the world today. The Tao is the way, in quotes. Richard Wilhelm translated the Chinese character of Tao into European language as meaning, which Jung appreciated very much. Jung said, "We must continue Wilhelm's work of translation in a wider sense if we wish to show ourselves worthy pupils of the master." The central concept of Chinese philosophy is Tao, and that's Tao, just for the listeners, which Wilhelm translated as meaning, just as Wilhelm gave the spiritual treasure of the East a European meaning. So we should translate this meaning into life. To do this, that is, to realize Tao, would be the true task of the pupil. In Delphi, there is the omphalos. The symbol confers the meaning of searching for the center of all things, including the union of opposites. According to legend, Delphi, as the temenos for the omphalos, contains the means for communicating with God or the spirit of the depths. If we still have the chance to communicate with the depths, as Jung did, perhaps we should remember the image and meaning of the color red, the principle Zong and equilibrium, or as Mehring described it, the plant of immortality, the awakening of the spiritual breath, and the secret of bringing the right hand to life, and of those who have reached the highest stage of perfection and stay behind on earth for the salvation of mankind. As Jung's last sentence in the Red Book puts it so modestly, I knew how frightfully inadequate this undertaking was, but despite much work and many distractions, I remained true to it, even if another possibility never. So the Red Book, the Liber Novus, with the cinnabar red cover and the Book of the Heart in Chinese, may serve as a guide for our world today. And omphalos also is sacred staff, and it was always used to, usually as a dowsing tool, but to sight a sacred building. So the priest or priestess would carry the omphalos, the sacred staff, and when they stood upon the place where it was the center of the water underneath, they would back up and go over to the side and plant the staff. And what's interesting is by doing so, literally in the fountain, in the middle of where they were going to build this building, the center was not in the middle. So it was hidden by being right next to. So in a sense, it's a conveyance of there's always mystery, even if it's in that sense made.
Well, and it seems to me what this is getting at is the importance of symbols and symbolism in Jungian psychology. Because the problem we have is that if we talk about anything, then we're already not at the center, at the way. In Taoism, Tao would be the way, not the meaning. But the problem is that everything is composed of many things. So if you take a symbol like the American flag, sure, we can say that, the colors and the stars and the stripes mean certain things. But as soon as you say that, as soon as you say that the red is for blood, for example, you're already getting past, you're already not talking about the meaning of the flag, okay? And in that sense, and because I'm a school teacher, I'm every day reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. It has more and more meaning to me going forward. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and for the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now, if we take it apart, it's no longer a symbol. Then we're just, we can write thousands of words about what even the Pledge of Allegiance means and whether it should have the words, and millions of words have been raised about whether it should have the words under God. I personally think it should have those words, but at this point, but I can tell you that when I was in the fifth grade and they added that to the Pledge of Allegiance, I didn't like that idea. But in any case, the
Well, and
pledge,
go
yeah,
ahead.
just so, but in any case, the significance of a symbol is like the symbolism of a national flag. It it means everything that's behind it. A symbol means everything that's behind it, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly. Go ahead, Drew.
I was going to say too. I just learned, I think, a couple of weeks ago too, with the history of the Pledge of Allegiance. I didn't know that the under God was edit after, and didn't originally your hand go out up like that, and then later they changed it to over the heart, because I think once World War II hit, they said no, 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 don't do that because Germany's doing that. And didn't they have a different hand gesture
Oh
rather than
gosh, I don't know about that, and I really don't want to know, but
no? And it was
I do
so
point I do put my hand on my heart when I say the pledge.
yeah, and I always learned it that way too. But I've started noticing even the Pledge of Allegiance, even money, didn't have under God. It was like don't tread on me or something, and you get all that kind of history of these things we think are stable. They evolved too. They've been edited. So the
And
social,
they continue to evolve
yeah,
because in my school, which is largely African American, um, some of my students don't stand for the pledge, and they they somehow feel um, that the country has not supported them, and that can be a point of view. I mean, it's like one of our students asked one of our social studies teachers last week whether the world is flat, right? and,
yep.
and so you know, I would love to talk about the pledge and the flag with my students so that they understand why I feel it's important to do that exercise every day. And in some sense, it hurts me that they don't. But I've had students say, "Did you ever own slaves?" Okay, did you ever own slaves? To me, okay, and until we can get past that level of understanding, or is the world flat? Then the symbol of the American flag isn't accomplished, right?
Well, and I think what's funny in my joke with flat Earth theory, I the way I know that the way I know that the Earth is not flat, because if it was flat, cats would have already knocked everything off of it by
Righto. So we always have a lot of work to do. I mean, new human beings are new human beings, and they need to be carefully educated. And hopefully, we educate them with the truth, regardless of what group they are a part of. Because, you know, when you're born, you don't know much, and then you start to cry because you're hungry, and this kind goddess sticks a nipple in your mouth, and that's all you know, right? At that point. And and so we need um, we need to understand what all these things mean and what it means to be an American. And yes, slavery was horrible, okay? And it was a shame upon our national origin. But oh, by the way, for all these students are not now Americans, and they are not slaves, and they need to understand that they're not slaves, that they can take pride in what has been achieved in the country and respect the people who have given their lives for the country, um, of of whom I have known five personally. And so for me, it's a kind of affront to me when I stand and recite the pledge and my students don't, because I think of my five friends who died. But at the same time, I have to understand that these are children who haven't yet been educated properly, um, to
There's also
understand.
too the pushback of growing up that sometimes no matter what you do, they're going to do exactly the opposite. And part of it is just the defiance of coming into your own identity rather than ignorance.
Assuredly, yeah,
And so,
assuredly that's true, and that's my role as a special educator, and I'm pleased to announce that last week I learned that I did pass the special educator praxis. So
congratulations.
I nearly am complete in my certification process in the state of Maryland. I do have one more praxis to take on March 22nd, which is reading. And it isn't what you think.
Right.
And so anyway, I hope to complete that part of my journey on March 22nd. But in any case, I when we have students in detention, part of my job as a special educator is to visit them, my students who are students with individual education plans, IEPs, and um, I reemphasize three things. I say, why are we here? I say, middle school is a time to understand that you're going to have to take responsibility for your own life, and it's going to be up to you. It's not going to be up to your parents or anyone else. And I leave them with a question in a Jungian tradition of asking people to work on questions in the psyche, and that is, when are you going to grow up? Meaning, when are you going to mature? And part of our role is to keep these kids alive until they do grow up, and some don't. I mean, we about 8 days ago, we had a former student of our school, um, murdered in a parking lot, shot to death. And one of my co-teachers who's been in the school for many years wasn't aware of that, and we were in a teachers meeting, and she heard that for the first time, and wow, she just blew up. She just went into serious weeping for the loss of this child. So, um, we can't save everyone, but we can save a few. And whether it's important to have a Department of Education which funds my job or not is a serious question that we have to ask. Um, and I personally believe that my state, the state of Maryland, which is sovereign in its own right, will probably fund special education, even if the federal government does not. Um, but it's iffy in other states, I would think. So anyway, peace, everyone. Thank you, Jordan, for being here
Definitely.
and for adding to this discussion. And we will see you next week.
Have a great week.
Take care now. Peace.